my whole philosophy on everything is you have to take, like a 25,000 foot view of things. When it comes to your health or anything in life, you need to always kind of take a step back, take more of an aerial view, then you can make a better decision.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is where you are listening to this podcast now. I am so grateful, so happy, so tickled. Yes, I am tickled pink that you are here. This is, of course, the Freedom Club podcast. I'm your host, Curt Mercadante. It's Wednesday, so you know what that means. It's our interview segment, and I have a wonderful one for you today. I interview Kusha Karvandi. Many of you may know him. He's got a huge following. He's the pioneer, the creator, the founder of the BFR, the Blood Flow Restriction Training System. It's a fitness training system. You get the BFR bands. We're going to talk about that in today's interview. We're going to talk about the books he's authored. Go to Amazon. I'll put a link in the show notes. He's an author, entrepreneur. We talk about the 80-20 rule. We talk about productivity. We talk about building a business. We talk about health, fitness, diet, nutrition. Of course, I live streamed this interview in the Freedom Club community. It's my free Facebook community. And if you're not a member, what the hell are you waiting for? Go to Facebook right now. Search for Freedom Club community. You'll see my picture there. Click on it, apply to join. You'll likely get in unless you don't answer the questions. But I'm getting some great feedback from members of the Freedom Club community who watched this interview either live or on the archive video in that community. And a lot of folks said it had a real impact on how they look at their diet, their nutrition, their fitness. But of course, there's a lot more in this interview. We talk about it. Great discussion. Thank you for being here. If you want to join in future live streams, again, go Freedom Club community. Go to my website, by the way. If you ever have a question about anything you hear in this podcast, go to my website, curtmercadante.com, reach out, contact us. And by the way, while you're at the website, there's a little link called Freedom Course. If you want to jumpstart your freedom lifestyle, if you want to adapt the 5 pillars of the freedom lifestyle, superpowers, vision, alignment, outcomes, and flow to your life as soon as possible, click on the Freedom Course, join, register, sign up for my 30-day Freedom Lifestyle Transformation course. It's about, again, jumpstarting your freedom lifestyle so that you can get in it as soon as possible. But without further ado, here is my interview with author, entrepreneur, fitness, nutrition, diet guru, Kusha Karvandi.
Welcome to the Freedom Club podcast, where we strive to pull you out of your life of quiet desperation, out of your comfort zone of misery, and propel you into a life of freedom and fulfillment. And now, here's your host for this journey, international speaker and coach, and serial entrepreneur, Curt Mercadante.
Well, we are live here in the Freedom Club community. Hope everyone is doing well today. Everyone joining us live, anyone joining us, if you're listening to this a week later in the podcast. So we're here with Kusha Karvandi. How you doing today? Thanks for joining us.
Good. Thanks for having me.
So we were talking a little bit, we're going to get into everything you're doing. There's a lot of really cool stuff. And I really am drawn to everything you're doing because it's maybe in a few years it'll change, but a lot of it is outside what I would consider the mainstream, which I'm all about. And there's a lot of stuff in terms of, I was reading, actually on Goodreads, reading the description of one of your books in terms of, a lot of what they tell us about what we eat, what we should eat, what we shouldn't eat is totally wrong and total BS. But this is the Freedom Club community. And so, and a big part of what we talk about is health freedom. We talked to an oncologist about a month ago. His name is Bobby Canaru, TEDx speaker. And he's different than a lot of docs in that he likes to experiment. He likes to look outside just what he learned in med school, because actually one thing I've learned is that doctors take a few nutrition classes in med school, but really they rely on about as much information as the average Joe and Jane rely in looking at things. And he's done a lot of experimentations. At the time I spoke to him, I think he was about 60 days into the carnivore diet. He does those types of things and tests. But we talk about everything from relationship freedom to entrepreneurial freedom to health freedom. And so a question I always like to ask to kick things off is, what does that word freedom mean to you?
Yeah, for me, freedom is really, it's time. Whether you're talking about wealth or health, in my opinion, it's not about having more things or more money. It's really just having, in my opinion, more time to do the things you want to do. And so, as it pertains to wealth, for instance, if you have more money, it affords you to have more time. You're not trading your time for money because you're stuck at a dead end job, working 15 hours a day. Instead, you've accrued enough wealth to be able to do whatever you want to do when you want to do it. And health, it goes kind of along the same lines, in my opinion, because if you have good health, you'll have more energy and more time to do the things you want to do. Whereas, if you're not in good health, you're going to be lacking energy. You're not going to be able to, get the things done you want in a day. And I think anyone who's, probably entrepreneur overachiever has probably been there as well, where they're, burnt out, they don't have any energy. And, at the end of the day, they're exhausted. They can't even find time to get a workout in, things like that. So I think both are very, very related, and they kind of relate back to time, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think, when it comes to health, there's a lot of folks who feel like they're trapped by time, right? They don't have enough time to work out. They don't have enough time to do certain things. They're traveling a lot. And in my opinion, it's about creating that time to make sure it happens, because you can become a prisoner of aches and pains, right? Back problems. But they become a prisoner and trapped to those things, whether it's an endless cycle of medications and prescription drugs, whether it's trapped by a high carbohydrate diet.
Mm-hmm.
They think they have to live that way. They're told they have to live that way. And I love what you do, which is you take a counterintuitive approach from that. It's a lot of people think they have to absolutely kill themselves in the gym to the point where they're throwing up all the time, like they're like they're going to be Navy SEALs.
Yep.
Exactly. And some people injure themselves. They screw up their metabolism. They do a lot of those things. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your overall health philosophy? Because I know it differs from what a lot of people read or hear, maybe from their doctor.
Yeah, I began the journey as, a personal trainer. So I acquired, I'm really big on education. I always have been. And so I acquired a lot of certifications in the field because I thought that, having more and more education, more certifications under my belt would make me a better trainer. But after doing like a dozen of these certifications, I found that they were all kind of saying the same thing. And I'm like, well, I'm not really getting any further. And I'm also not able to overcome obstacles with my clients with regard to pain, with regard to mobility, with regard to strength. I was hitting the same barriers. You can only do so much when you look at the body like a biomechanical object. And that's how all these organizations are looking at and training trainers on how to look at their clients. They're looking at you like you're a robot and it's just mechanics. So if you're tight, you need to foam roll or a raw thing or, deep tissue massage, and it needs to be painful. Or if you want to, get strong, or if you want to get lean, you have to throw up, like you said. It has to be high intensity. You got to do a lot of sets, super heavy weight. And that's the only way. And, the one thing that I kind of stumbled upon that helped me overcome these barriers was something called functional neurology. And it's basically a field that looks at, the nervous system and the brain and neurology and says, how can we take this and what we know about it and use, some real world applications, things that someone can do themselves. And I'll give some examples in a second, but things that they can do that can allow them to immediately see results with regard to pain, performance, speed, et cetera. So, I started taking those concepts and applying them in, the world of personal training. And then I started really noticing how much faster I was getting results with clients, helping them, knock out pain or instantly improve mobility by doing something, for example, like a vision exercise. You don't see anybody in the gym training their eyes to improve strength or flexibility.
Wow.
But these are the things that, I uncovered were things that were obviously backed by neuroscience that they were using, that neurologists use, but in a different context. They're using it in medicine, not in the gym. And so I started applying all this stuff. And that's when I, stumbled upon after that, this field of blood flow restriction training, which sounded very counterintuitive. I thought, why would you want to restrict blood flow? in order to, make gains in the gym. Most of what you hear is that you want to improve blood flow with regard to exercise. So I became really intrigued when I started seeing the hundreds and hundreds of studies that have been around for decades, over 3 decades now, 4 decades of research, peer-reviewed research out there on BFR training with regard to performance, hypertrophy, which is muscle size, speed, and et cetera. And so I became really intrigued, and that's, when, one thing led to another, and we decided to make a product for the marketplace that didn't really exist at the time, which was, making our practical BFR bands. And we made these bands so that, pretty much anybody, without having to spend a fortune, could, start utilizing this methodology at home, in a hotel room with limited equipment, or, at their gym. They could utilize this with lightweight, and it mimics the effects of lifting with heavier weight. So that's the big appeal of BFR, is that it's, when you wear these bands on your upper arms or upper legs, it's allowing you to get similar results to what you would get with higher intensity exercise without having to do the higher intensity exercise. Doesn't mean that it's effortless, still requires effort, it's still going to burn and still going to make you sweat, but it doesn't require the same type of, high intensity or same load. You're not going to be lifting heavy weight. You're going to be lifting like 20% of your 1 rep max or less, which is very, very lightweight. So that really intrigued me. And going back to your point, circling all this stuff back together, is that, what I realized from all of this is that, you want to be able to get more from your workout. I think Pavel Tsatsouline, the kettlebell guy, he said it best. He said, your workout should leave you with more than what it takes out of you. And that's always kind of stuck with me as a trainer, is that's how your workouts should be. But I think 99% of the people in the gym are not training with that philosophy. They're training with pain, and they're training with agony. They're in there. You can see it on their face. They're not happy to be there. They're doing it because they feel like they have to, especially the gym rats. They do it every single day in and day out, no matter how bad they feel. They force themselves to do the same routine over and over because they're afraid of losing those gains and not making progress. When in reality, many times you need to, take a step back to take 2 steps forward. And doing high intensity training all the time, or doing heavy training all the time, is going to take such a toll on your nervous system and on your brain that you're going to be overtaxed and overtrained. And so it's like diminishing returns. You're just going to keep digging a deeper and deeper hole for yourself that's going to be harder to dig out of. Then, with something like BFR, you're getting similar results, but way less load on the nervous system, because you're not lifting heavier weight. So by virtue of lifting with lightweight, it's less of a stressor on the system, which allows you to, allows your body to, see results with regard to muscle gain and protein synthesis and hypertrophy easier than what you would see with heavier training because of that. So you don't really see people talking about that, but that's what it is.
Yeah. So Pavel, when he did he'd interviewed or did a guest blog post for Tim Ferriss, I'd say maybe 3 years ago, totally changed my workout routine, because I was in there for like an hour and 20 minutes. And I'm not someone who sits and talks to people. Like, it was a pretty intense hour and 20 minutes. And I just plateaued. I was tired. I was actually I felt like I was getting in worse shape. From that, now I spend between 20 to 30 minutes. Sometimes I go to 35 minutes in the gym, and I'm in better shape. I box. And so sometimes I box, but I find myself getting injured a lot more with the boxing because it's pretty high intensity for an hour at a time. But since I've lowered the amount of time, and a big part of what I do in my overall coaching program is focused on outcomes, the shortest, simplest, straightest line to your outcomes. And that might not be, in our lives, just like a workout. When you add something in, it's hard to take it away, even if it's not bringing you closer to your outcome. So it's like you add arm curls and you do that for a month. And it's like, well, you don't really need to do that. Oh, but I can't take those away because I'm so addicted to doing those arm curls. When in fact, like you're saying, or I'm addicted to, I'm only lifting 20%. That can't be doing anything. I got to lift 80% of it. Well, no, it's having the same impact. It's getting into your outcome. Some people let those inputs dictate your day. How do you, so obviously you've measured this, right? Where you have people test this, and then do you have them, not on a regular basis, but I'm saying for your own testing purposes, then they go and they try to max, and they test their actual max strength, or 90% of max, something like that, and they've actually improved?
Yeah, there's actually, you can look up, if you go to Google Scholar, Google Scholar is a good search engine to look up the peer-reviewed research for the general public. So if you wanted to see what research is out there very quickly, you won't have access to the full studies most likely for many of them, but you can at least read the abstract, which shows the conclusion of the studies. And there's a famous bench press study on BFR where they, because a lot of people ask me, how do you do it for the chest? Like, how would you do BFR for your chest? You'd still wear them on the upper arms. You still wear them at the top of the arms, just below the delt, where the deltoid meets the bicep. Same place, except you train chest with the same philosophy of several sets, 3, 4, 5 sets, and high reps, 15 to 30 reps with light weight and short rest periods. And what they found is that they saw not only pec growth, so the pecs grew, they saw an increase in pec size, but the bench press strength also went up. So they saw, growth, I think it was like 9% or 10% growth in bench press strength. With the BFR than without the BFR. So it's interesting to see that even though you're, taking, like I said, you're taking a step back because you're training with lighter weight, but it allows you, when you do go heavier again, it allows you to take two steps forward. What you don't really see in a lot of the studies yet, because again, I think that even the field of exercise science, which is doing a lot of this research on practical BFR, they're still looking through things through the biomechanical lens that a lot of those organizations I talked about earlier, they're still looking at things that way. So they're not looking at things in terms of how does it affect the neurology. So when I think about BFR, I think about, why is it how could it have an effect on strength if you're not actually lifting heavy? You would think that based on specific adaptations and imposed demands, the SAID principle, that without lifting heavy, how can I get stronger? And the reason being, I think, is that your brain is like a governor chip. Your brain wants to limit your ability to generate strength in a way to protect you. So our true strength, our absolute strength, even without being way bigger, most people have a certain potential of strength they have right now they're not using, and that's their brain holding them back so they don't break their bones, damage their joints, and so forth. So even without being any bigger than you are right now, you actually have more strength than you think. It's kind of like you hear these stories, the mother who lifts the helicopter, whatever it may be. And even if those are exaggerated, whatever it may be, the idea is that you have more strength than, your muscles can produce more force than your brain will allow you to. And the reason is to keep you safe. There's good reason for it. And I think for most people, especially if you've been training for a while, you've been doing heavier weight, I think by virtue of doing heavy weight, what happens over time is your range of motion and your form slowly degrades over time. And what happens is, in my opinion, you're basically retraining the brain of how to move. You're remapping for the brain. It's like you're basically, your brain has different maps of how to move the body relative to space and time. And you're remapping for the brain how to move the joints and how to contract those specific muscles. And so when you're lifting with heavy weight and you're trying to go heavier, you're trying to increase your max, you're trying to hit new records, and you get stuck when you hit a plateau, my opinion on that is that you're hitting that plateau mainly because your brain thinks that you've hit your end range. So your brain says, oh, you don't have enough strength in that range of motion, or I don't have good awareness of how to control and keep you safe in that range of motion under that load. So therefore, I'm going to make sure that you can't exert any more force. Whereas with BFR, by virtue of lifting with heavier weight, it's way less threatening to the brain. So the brain's not threatened by this because you're lifting with lightweight, and you're going to be able to do a much more fuller range of motion and with proper form because it is lighter weight. So you can control it more. You can embrace that mind-muscle connection better. And that's why I think you're improving that mapping. You're improving that joint and contractile mapping of the muscle fibers. So your brain has better awareness of how to move, which then your brain says, okay, I feel safer, so therefore I can turn the volume up on strength and performance. So that's what I think is happening there. That you'll start to see more research that looks at it from that perspective.
And I think this entire philosophy can be applied to anything. Entrepreneurship, life, living, where a lot of times we think we have to have almost overwhelming loads in our day, where we think busy, right, is a badge of honor in some case. And if we're busy, no matter what we're actually achieving, we must be working hard. We must be going in the right direction. The more you can pile on 30, 40 to-dos in a day, when really, if you just have those three outcomes, you feel like you're working less, but you're actually getting more accomplished, right?
Exactly. It's like you mentioned Tim Ferriss earlier, and he talks about the 4-hour work week. And I thought about this, in the past. It's kind of funny to think about like the traditional 8-hour workday, 40 hours a week. And I always wonder, I'm like, how many people are actually working 8 hours in a day? The people who go to work, 9 to 5, how much work are they actually doing in those 8 hours? How much time is, essentially wasted screwing around, checking emails, checking Facebook, not being truly productive? And when you think about that, it's the same thing in the gym. Someone goes to the gym for an hour, they're actually most likely getting 6 to 7 minutes of actual work done in an hour. If you count the 10 minutes of rest breaks, texting, checking social media, all this stuff you see happening in the gym, if you count all that stuff, excluding cardio, because obviously if you're walking on a machine, you're exercising. But if we're talking about weight training, someone who goes to the gym to weight train for an hour, I would bet you they're doing 6 to 7 minutes of actual physical work. 10 reps. It's like 10 seconds of exercise, and then they rest for a few minutes and then do it again. And they do that 3 times. And they go into the next exercise. You're talking about 6 to 7 minutes of actual work in that hour. So it's like when you talk about like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because there's, bodybuilders, there's obviously some big people out there who have, made a lot of progress on, efficiency in the gym. You don't necessarily have to be constantly lifting under load, time under tension of 60 minutes. You don't need that. But I do think that, nobody needs strength. You don't need more than 30 to 40 minutes of actual work done in the gym in a day, 3 to 5 days a week to make progress.
Yeah.
So less is often more for most people, especially considering if you have a life outside of the gym. If you're not a professional bodybuilder, you have, work, you probably have kids, you have other stressors. And, we talked about earlier how the brain responds to stress and threat. All these stressors accumulate. There's a part of the brain called the amygdala, and it's collecting all these stressors and threats. They're collecting, digestive stressors, postural stressors, psychological stressors. Everything's accumulating until you reach that spilling point. And that spillover is going to manifest itself in the form of tightness, pain, decreased strength, increased weight gain, and increased fat gain. These things are a consequence often of too much stress and overaccumulation and a lack of stress tolerance. So, when we talk about how do people make progress, sometimes they just have to either reduce stress by cutting certain things out, or they have to become more stress tolerant. They have to train their body. And that's what weight training is. It's resilience to load. It's, making your body more resilient to physical stress.
It's amazing. A lot of people, I don't think, realize how that extra cup or two of coffee in the afternoon can boost their but it can boost their cortisol, maybe affect their sleep a little bit, even though they had it at 1. Some of the sleep, some of the extra stresses they put on themselves. And they think, well, I'm getting along just fine. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it, they may define getting along just fine by I'm awake, I'm at work, or, well, I've only put on 3 pounds or I lost 2 pounds. And they don't think about the impact of stress on inflammation. And maybe it's the difference between living to 80 instead of 75, those cumulative effects of the stress and the inflammation over their lives. I think all too often people judge whether or not they're in shape or healthy by just their weight or their cholesterol number, which obviously there's a lot of coming out with the cholesterol that, and which by the way, so you go on Amazon, you got a ton of books on Amazon, right? You have your BFR bands, which we've talked about. You also have a number of books that on entrepreneurship, things that aren't necessarily BFR bands related, right? And health related. But I also love the Eat Fat, Get Fit. I've been paleo since 2009 due to a lot of about 12 years of massive pain and emergency room visits where I was told it was something else and eat more grains, eat more fiber, eat less fat. And the problem got worse. And I'm on a very high fat, low carb diet. I haven't had a beer or a grain in 10 years. My cholesterol is very high, except the ratio of good to bad is incredible. And I do all the things that they tell you not to do.
Yep, exactly.
And
eating butter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I cook everything in butter. We have a lot of ghee butter. We do those things. So tell us a little bit about that, about your ideas on nutrition. And because I think a lot of people become a slave to
the high insulin producing glucose, high carbohydrate, low fat diet because they've told, oh, that's okay. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I think the key is, the nutrition stuff for me actually came before all of the other stuff I talked about. It came before the nutrition journey began before all this. Mainly, because my wife, we met in high school, and when we moved together, we grew up in Oregon. We moved together to San Diego, and we found out she had Crohn's disease shortly after we moved to San Diego. We were early, we were probably 18, 19 years old. And she had to have basically a bowel resection, had to have 6 inches of the intestine removed. And so after that, we had to do a lot of our own research on diet because, the lead, some of the top gastroenterologists at UCSD Medical Center, which is, world renowned, were telling her that diet doesn't matter. A disease of the intestines, telling her diet, they told her, you can eat a Snickers bar. And that just made me crazy because I thought, what kind of doctor, period, would tell anyone to eat a Snickers bar? More or less someone with the disease of the intestines. And I thought that was absolutely insane. So fortunately, she found actually an integrative medicine MD, a doctor who she, had some of the traditional philosophies, but a lot of these other more Eastern philosophies. And she was like, no, diet does matter, and really started turning her on to things like the specific carbohydrate diet, GAPS diet. We looked at a lot of these different things. And the culmination of it really kind of led me to Weston A. Price Foundation. So I learned a lot from studying Weston A. Price. And actually, a long time ago, I interviewed Sally Fallon Morell, the leader of that organization, on our podcast a long time ago. But they do some great stuff. And, Weston A. Price, if you've never read his book, I think it's called, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, something like that. So really, it's a classic book. And it talks about how this guy was basically a dentist by trade. And he was traveling the world looking at these indigenous populations. And he discovered something that was so fascinating. He discovered some of these indigenous populations around the world that had perfect teeth. They had no wisdom teeth that had to be pulled. They didn't have cavities. And then he started seeing other things like no heart disease. They didn't have, obesity. And so he started looking at their diets and what are they eating, and they were eating very similar to how you're eating, much more animal products. They weren't eating vegetarian. He didn't find a single healthy vegetarian or vegan population. And so they were eating animal products. They were eating higher fat diets. They were eating the whole animal. They weren't just eating muscle meat, which can be inflammatory. They're eating the bone broth. They were having the joint matrix, the cartilage, the tendons. They're having those other amino acids that support the amino acids in the muscle meat. And so I thought it was really, really interesting, just got really deep into it. And that's essentially Eat Fat, Get Fit is based on a lot of those philosophies. And it's really designed, that book was designed to kind of break down a lot of the dogmas around things like salt and that sodium will raise your blood pressure. And that fat is bad for you.
Saturated fat, right? Yeah. Oh, it's so bad for you. And
exactly.
When you slather it on butter and have a pound of pasta,
Exactly. I think that I do feel like, there is still something to be said about calories in versus calories out. Some people will say, oh, no, it's not about calories in versus calories out. Some people will say, yes, it 100% is. The truth is somewhere in the middle. There are factors. There's energy has to be transferred. So the fact of the matter is, yes, it does matter. But I think that you can't just dumb it down to say, eat whatever you want, but only focus on calories because, you can't neglect. One of the things I don't see a lot of the people on the other side talk about, the people who are all about, just following the research, and the research says, that keto doesn't work and that, you should be able to eat whatever you want. What they neglect is the hedonics. So, there's 2 parts to eating. You have the homeostatic part of it, which is your gut telling you you're full. Your stomach has hormones that tell you you're full. That's a homeostatic response. And then you have the hedonic, the emotional part of it, that there's certain cravings and emotions tied to certain foods, just like habits. So you have to kind of look at both, and you have to say, okay, well, even though a certain diet, maybe like keto, for instance, maybe, eating as much fat as you want, eating as much butter as you want is not the solution for somebody to lose weight. But if they could still make sure that they're staying at a negative energy balance by, being sensible about how much they eat, not overeating. And if a keto diet does help them adhere to that better than a different diet, like for me, if I eat carbs, I tend to eat, it triggers my hunger. I'll eat more. Nobody eats 10 eggs, 10 whole eggs, and they're like, oh gosh, I'm starving now. I'm craving 10 more eggs. But you start eating some ice cream, next thing you know, you eat the whole pint. How does that happen? You eat a little bit of cereal, you eat the whole box. So it happens because for many people, I think those cravings can kick in and they can become triggers. And so for, obviously everyone's different. And so my philosophy on, diet has changed a bit since I wrote that Eat Fat, Get Fit book now. If I were to write another book, which at some point I will, instead of being a diet book, it would be like a preface to a diet. It would be a roadmap to how do I pick the right diet for me? And how do I measure? What would I, check? Because certain foods that are deemed healthy may not be healthy for everybody. Maybe yogurt, for instance, is healthy for one person, but maybe for somebody else's metabolism, it doesn't agree with them and it causes their metabolics to crash for whatever reason, causes their nervous system to have a adverse response. And, maybe it's not good for their hunger or their energy. So you have to look at, when it comes to diet, obviously it depends on what your particular goals are and what you care about. I'm looking at the holistic view. My perspective is not just about, okay, if I eat this particular diet, is it going to help me lose weight? That's how most people are thinking of, like, well, keto will help me lose weight. Or, the other side of it will say, no, the research has shown keto won't help you lose weight. I don't really care about either of that. I want to know about, yes, if weight loss is the goal, that's good, but let's also consider the other things like energy and well-being and, everything else associated with it. So it's not just the weight loss. You want to look at like which is giving you the best quality of life and which is the easiest to adhere to without making you unhealthy. You don't want some crazy diet that says just eat meat, don't eat anything else. And yeah, you lose weight, but you're putting yourself, at risk for all kinds of other ailments or issues later or something. So yeah, I think that the best diet is, really more of a roadmap. It's more of like an algorithm almost of like, how do I figure out what diet's best for me? What could I check? Maybe it's temperature, maybe it's heart rate, and then I eat a food and then I check it. It's more of like a assess and reassess type of concept that somebody should be doing in order to figure out what diet is best for them, rather than saying, I don't like demonize anything. I don't want to say, oh, keto is bad and vice versa. I don't want to say, oh, sugar is bad. No one should ever eat sugar. No one should ever eat carbs. I think for some people, maybe a diet that's balanced in carbohydrates, fats, and proteins works for them. Another person, they function best on a more ketogenic style diet that's higher in fats and proteins and lower in carbs. So it's all going to come down to that individual.
Let's talk about entrepreneurship and, your story and what you're doing, selling not only your books, but the BFR bands, right? You're selling them on your website, you're selling them on Amazon. And you've tapped into something that so many people want to do and so many people don't do. Either they never get started, right? Yep. I got this side hustle. I'm going to go for it. And they just never do it because of real fear, because of other things, right? Or they try it and it doesn't work, and they try something else and it doesn't work. You've tapped into it. You've been able to. So I guess first, let us know. You've been at this. You've been selling the BFR bands online for how long? It's going gangbusters. And how did you get to that point?
Yeah, we started, probably 2011 now. So we started a long time ago now, 8 years or so. And it's such a slow, and it's like this long, slow ramp of death. You want things to happen quickly, and you want to get over these certain hurdles quickly. You want to get. I think anyone who's trying to become an entrepreneur most likely is because they don't like the environment they're working in. They're tired of being not having freedom of their time and dealing with a boss or dealing with corporate politics. And I had dealt with all that stuff. I had worked in gyms for a long time and dealt with politics and all kinds of, junk that I didn't want to deal with anymore. And so I said, we're going to go off on our own and we're going to create products for people. And, because I was really passionate about just like creating and inventing and building. And that's something that still drives me today as an entrepreneur. So I think, the moral of the story is that for me, what got us to, continue to be entrepreneurs and stay on this path and continue to grow is really to stay within what a mentor of mine calls the success signature. So everyone, just like everyone has like a fingerprint, everyone has their own DNA, everyone has something unique about them that, identifies them. And, the way that this mentor of mine described it is like, this is like, your success signature is this circle around you that you don't want to go outside of. You don't want to color outside that line, because as soon as you do, you're now diffusing your attention. You're now chasing a million shiny objects and you're getting outside your core competency. But if you really want to be successful, it's like Warren Buffett says, like really successful people, they say no to almost everything. And I would say most, especially beginning entrepreneurs, like even myself, even to this day, it's so hard to say no, because you see an opportunity like, oh my God, this could be a great partnership. This could be a great opportunity. This could be, really big. And you chase all these shiny objects, and 99% of the time, nothing ever happens with them. It ends up being just a distraction and money, waste of money and waste of time. So you need to just like really, really, I think you first have to have a vision of the future of like what you want to gain out of entrepreneurship and gain out of life. And then you just have to focus on, okay, what's my differentiator? What am I best at? Am I best at inventing? Am I best at selling? Am I best at video? Am I best at blogging? Whatever it may be, figure out what your core competency is and just figure out how to stay within that. And over time, I mean, in the beginning, you're going to have to physically do more of the other tasks, like the things you don't want to do because you don't have a team yet. But over time, you want to find ways to start growing your team so that way you can unload many of those tasks so you can stay within your success signature and you can maximize, what your specific strength is. So,
yeah, I love that. I love, vision, having those outcomes set, and saying no is so important. I'm a strengths coach, a Gallup strengths coach, not in the gym in terms of strengths coach. And so I'm a big believer in finding those strengths and amplifying them rather than focusing on what you're worst at. What are your weaknesses? I got to spend my time doing that. One of my strengths is responsibility. And that responsibility strength leads me, if I say I'm going to do something, I have to do it. Yep. I also, if someone tells me they're going to do something, I have a severe expectation that they're going to keep their word. And so it really, but it also can hold me back. It leads me out of a sense of responsibility or guilt to do things that I wouldn't normally want to do. And you talk about all those things that entrepreneurs could do in a day. And a lot of those are, you talk to another entrepreneur and they're like, no, this worked for me. You have to do that.
Yep.
And it worked for them. I get a lot, I've had a lot of success on LinkedIn, building my business on LinkedIn and through LinkedIn video. I regularly get people who come up to me. I was actually in Cairo, Egypt, and there was a guy with a startup selling medical equipment. He wanted to find customers for like wheelchairs and things like that. And he's like, you're successful on LinkedIn. How do you do it? I'm like, whoa. Let's step back a little bit. Like, is your customer base on LinkedIn? Are you really going to be good on LinkedIn video? I mean, there's just some people who, like you said, they're not going to be good on video. They're going to be good at writing. They're going to be good at this. So I really love hearing you say that because a lot of people spin their wheels, whether it's back to the Pavel, Tim Ferriss discussion or them, there's a million things we can do and there's like 3 we should do.
Exactly. Yeah. This famous coach, this guy, Dan Sullivan, he's got his, his organization that it's called Strategic Coach. And I love their stuff because he talks about like, you got to find your unique ability. And whatever that unique ability is, that's what you really have to figure out. How do I continue to foster that unique ability every day? And that's why I think the goal of an entrepreneur on a daily basis is to just constantly 80-20. Like, what are the 20%, top 20% tasks that must be done today that are going to produce the other 80% of the results? Everything else is mostly noise. You can create a chart and you can map out every day of, here are the things that are most important and urgent. And then you can talk about the other quadrants of, important but not urgent, urgent but not important, et cetera. And I think that's what a good entrepreneur should do every day is 80-20. What are the 80-20 tasks today? The Pareto principle tasks that I have to do today. And not worry so much about like, okay, I need to get 8 hours worth of work done or 12 hours worth of work done. And I need to work 7 days a week and, burn the candle at both ends. I've actually found that over time, our business grew the most when I actually found time and actually, started to really attribute value to, my own health and my own time. and time to, because you have to look like you're your best asset. If you're an entrepreneur, your mind and your vision and your clarity are your best asset. So you can't neglect, giving your brain a break. If certain things like watching one of your favorite shows, or for me, it's like hitting the sauna, certain things are going to rejuvenate you. Maybe it's traveling, whatever it may be. They're going to rejuvenate you, and they're going to give you the perspective you need to continue to grow your business and to continue to overcome, what may seem as like challenging problems. Most of the problems you deal with, most of the fires that we deal with on a daily basis, they're just, just mental stuff. It's like mostly they're not even real problems. We just view it as like big issues, but it's just mental stuff that's not really affecting us. So sometimes it's good to take a step back, make a plan of like, okay, I have to do my workouts on these days and at these times, or I've got to, at least once a week, go and do this, get a massage, or, whatever it may be. You have to schedule in the things that take care of yourself, because you're your best asset. If you don't take care of yourself, like many entrepreneurs don't, they just constantly, they get sick and they keep working, burning the candle at both ends. And eventually they just kind of burn out. They have no new fresh ideas. And that's how you get killed, because, your competitors are going to continue to innovate. And if you're just selling the same thing, doing the same thing without changing and improving, the marketplace is going to, vote with their money somewhere else. They're going to say, oh, you know what, this product over here is better. So you have to constantly innovate. But the only way to be innovative and creative is by allowing your mind to relax. A stressed mind is a constrained mind. You need that mind to be relaxed so it can think freely and come up with new, fresh ideas.
It's something, and this was when I had my PR agency as well as now. I think there's something. I'm not like a woo-woo person like this, but like there's something in the universe too. Whenever I pick up in the middle of the day and I go to the beach, I come back and I have a message waiting for me. It's a new client. When I had my agency, if I really wanted to get a new project or a new client, I'd go on vacation and I'd get it. If I go to the gym, that's when I get people coming in asking me for new business. It's crazy. It always happens that way. Now, some of it I think is the energy, right? Is then I get up and I do a sales video or I do something like that, and you can sense the tension is gone. Certainly, I talk a lot about lifestyle and getting people to freedom lifestyle. So if I'm doing a video in front of the ocean versus, sitting at a desk, I think it makes a difference. But I interviewed someone here. She's a member in my Facebook group, and she had been wanting to leave her job for a long time and just kept putting it off, was fearful to do it, and was fearful that she would quit and not be able to get a new job. She went in, was going to quit that day, got fired instead. She got a call that night from a friend and said, hey, are you going to quit your job? I have a project for you. She got that new project, freelance project, paid her more than the job that she was afraid of quitting. It was this weird thing. And I talk to people all the time where that happens. And it's like, there's coincidences, but it happens enough that it's like something, that energy we put off. I feel, it's a law of attraction, I guess, right? And Sean Achor talks about the happiness advantage when it's that constrained mind, stress mind being a constrained mind. And I think it manifests itself in many ways.
Yeah, I think that anybody, if you have people who are listening who are in a job, they want to leave their job, they want to have their, they want to work for themselves. I think it's important, number one, to look at both sides, because entrepreneurship, number one, is not for everybody. And I think that, the hard part is that, that the media and certain things want to make it seem like entrepreneurship is the only way to go. And that's the way that, everyone needs to be an entrepreneur. And I don't think it's the case. I knew a guy, for instance, really, really smart guy, Harvard MBA. He went into entrepreneurship and, he worked for, he's in a corporation, worked for a big company and, making great money. But, he was very much like me where, he wanted more freedom and he didn't want to, money is not the only motivator. Time is really important, having a freedom of time. So he decided to go off on his own, was doing, I think, consulting and some other things. And, it seemed like, I think he came to his own realization that, being off on his own, at least, at where he was and what his ultimate goals were with retirement, how kind of close he was to retirement anyway. He decided that he got an offer from a friend to go work in this smaller company, which kind of had the best of what he wanted. It's like he gets this flexible environment where he's part of that inner circle. He's still has kind of the the freedom and the kind of the power that he wants when he goes to work. But, he also doesn't have it's almost like as an entrepreneur, you almost have too much freedom. You have to control, you have to figure out, okay, what do I need to get done today? I need to figure out what my tasks are. I need to figure out what my team's tasks are. It can be a little bit daunting and a little bit nebulous, and some people just get lost. And so it's not always right for everybody. And I think that's okay to realize that and determine, you know what, maybe it's not the best path for me. Maybe I should make a plan of how do I get, maybe their ultimate goal is really just financial independence. If that's your goal, you can get there by having a side hustle. You could have several side hustles, and eventually maybe you go off on your own once you have enough income from those other side hustles. And that's the ultimate goal. But if your true goal is to start an enterprise or a business, whatever it may be, and you really want to be an entrepreneur, then I think you need to, like you said, you need to figure out, clear plan, don't allow yourself to get too stressed, and make time for yourself, and just 80-20 every day.
Cool. We do have a few questions, comments. For those listening on the podcast, we do live stream all these interviews in the Freedom Club community on Facebook. If you're not a member, what the hell's wrong with you? Go to Facebook now, search the Freedom Club community. You'll see my ugly mug. That's the group. Apply to join. Come in. You can join live streams like this. So Fred, you kind of answered this question perhaps, but Freddie asks to Kusha, what do you think about the blood type diet? Blood type dieting. I hear a lot about that.
Yeah, I think I even mentioned that in my Eat Fat, Get Fit book. I talked a little bit about that. And the guy, I think his name was Peter Diadamo. He was the guy that did the research, or, kind of wrote that blood type diet book. A lot of that stuff had to do more with like what he observed in terms of like with his patients, what he observed with diets with respect to their different blood types than it was, in terms of facts, in terms of like what because the book kind of poses like, for your blood type, you must eat these foods. It was more about observations, I think, than it was about, what people actually are going to respond to when they eat something. And again, I think it goes back to, you need to find the diet that works best for you by checking certain variables. The simplest things to check would be checking, you just keep track of what you eat, and then just track your digestion for that day. Bowel movements, energy levels. These are simple variables that have to do with your overall digestion and wellness and health. Whatever is important to you that you want to get out of the diet, those are the things you want to be checking. So, you can always try something like the blood type diet, see if it works for you. And if it does, then great. Now okay, this diet agrees with me and it works. So, that's the one I'm going to be sticking with moving forward. But you don't ever want to be so constrained that you can think, I can never eat, sugar ever again, or I can never eat that food because the diet says no. I think the human body is designed to be metabolically flexible. We're designed to live on different corners of the planet and designed to be, metabolically flexible to handle different types of foods. I don't think we would have taste buds for sugar if we weren't, meant to eat sugar. We wouldn't have taste buds for sweet if we weren't meant to have any sweet. So I think obviously everything in moderation. Like I said, everyone's different. Certain people can handle more of certain things than others. But yeah, I think the key thing is to keep in mind flexibility in the long run. What you want is to make your body more flexible, not to intentionally make your body more constrained and not to be able to handle dairy or grains or anything in the long run.
Do you get blood tests regularly for lipids, triglycerides, and all that, or not necessarily? I know some people get it tested all the time.
Not all the time. I'd say probably once a year I'll check it just to get a general idea of the direction where they're headed. I think it's just a good practice for people to do, just to see where things are, see if there's anything that sticks out.
Yeah. I think it's also important to go beyond just just that one cholesterol number and your weight. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of those other things are precursors to a lot of other things other than just heart attack or.
Exactly. You need to look at things like HDL, cholesterol, and you need to look at HDL in comparison to total cholesterol. A lot of people will look like, oh my God, my LDL is so high. And LDL is the bad cholesterol. But nothing is bad. It's just, one of them has a certain job. One of them takes cholesterol away from the body and one of it brings it in. And so you have to look at other factors. That's why, my whole philosophy on everything is you have to take, like a 25,000 foot view of things. When it comes to your health or anything in life, you need to always kind of take a step back, take more of an aerial view, and then you can make a better decision. And when it comes to tests, like blood tests or hormones, whatever it may be, there's always going to be, when you get the panels back, there's always going to be the reference ranges. But usually what you want to be looking at are what are called the optimal ranges. And the optimal ranges are usually going to be tighter. The reference ranges are based on a lot of the unhealthy people who are taking these tests. So when they factor in all that data, the reference ranges could be very broad. So you could be in the reference range and you're thinking, oh, okay, I'm in a good range. But doesn't mean that you're in the ideal range. So you want to look at, what's the optimal range for that particular line item, and then try to make sure you're in those optimal ranges. And if it's not, then that can tell you a story. That can tell you, okay, maybe that's why I don't feel so good, because this is too low, this is too high.
Yeah, and it's I think one of the big, and it's just our society now, right? It's so prescription drug based, and what is it? Staples has the easy button, and so people think, all I got to do is take Lipitor and I'm fine. I can go have that fried chicken. And they're not thinking about other cancer or other things that may arise from eating fried foods. Oh my! The other thing now that I'm seeing is everyone is so intent on stripping all the cholesterol out of their body, and there's a study out of UCLA found like an overwhelming amount of people who had heart attacks had extremely low cholesterol levels, but also that there is a need for cholesterol in your body. And so now people are starting to have bone issues, cholesterol, what coats the cells, coats the brains, it's produced naturally. And I think, a lot of these drugs are 20, 30 years old. And now we're seeing the effects of people who have been on it for 20 or 30 years. And maybe if you actually just ate a better diet overall, whatever that diet is, I think everyone kind of agrees the processed foods, the crappy oils, not good. Even if you're taking Lipitor or whatever drug it is. Yeah. And I think people think there's these miracle drugs that give them a get out of jail free card, and it's dangerous.
Yeah, I think again, it's like those are all Band-Aids. Those are all Band-Aids that it doesn't treat the root reason why. I don't think anyone has a Lipitor deficiency. So right. Why is their cholesterol? Number one, is their cholesterol a problem? Are they only looking at one facet? Are they taking that medication because just the LDL is a little bit high, or is it truly a problem? If you're, they say if your HDL is like less than 25% of your total cholesterol, that's not a good sign. That's not good. So you have to look at like the overall picture. That's just an example, but you have to look at the overall picture and say, what's the real root problem? And yeah, it's like with modern medicine, with Western medicine, they, want to give you Band-Aids because Band-Aids make money and they're quick and easy, and, it doesn't get to the root cause. And, what you want to figure out, and this is like, this is where, the internet and social media today has actually been somewhat valuable because there's more people who are able to get their voice out. Like Facebook is it's really just like word of mouth at scale. That's what Facebook is. It's allowing certain people to, get their message out about how there is another way to take care of yourself. You don't have to just rely on just the traditional methods to take care of yourself. You can explore other ways, like, trying a different diet to, fix your issue or get to the root issue. So, yeah, I think it's important to take responsibility over your health. That's like the first thing. It's like, okay, you're going to take responsibility, you're going to take ownership over it, and you're not going to just delegate your health to a doctor and just put the responsibility on them. Because you really can't. If you look at it, you can't put the onus on them because they're not asking you enough questions. Right. The process is not set up currently. The system is not set up for them to accept that kind of responsibility over their health, over your health. They'll say they are. I mean, legally they're responsible. If they give you the wrong information, they could get, malpractice type of issues. But when it comes to, ownership, in my opinion, you have to take ownership, because when you go to the doctor, how much time are they actually spending with you? How many are they even taking a history? They say like the average doctor visit is like 8 minutes. How much of a history can they take? How much of a correlation can they draw in 8 minutes? The system is designed to get you in and out of there. And that's just simply not enough time. A good session with a doctor, if they were really good, they spend an hour and a half with you, asking you, especially on that first visit, everything. Tell me about your sleep. Tell me about your digestion. Tell me about, stress. They'd be looking at the whole picture, not just, oh, you have a stomach ache? Take this. Oh, this looks a little bit high. Take this drug.
Totally. Desiree asks here in the group, she recently changed her diet because her doctor recommended it to treat her hypothyroidism. Now, I don't know what kind of diet he recommended, but I would say, to your exact point, become responsible, go and read up, do your own research. Remember, I have a relative who had a stroke last year, and some of the recommendations that she was getting from her doctor, it's like, the Snickers bar for an intestinal problem.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's a good chance your doctor may have had his or her last nutrition class 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And that's nothing against people of certain ages, whatever, but take responsibility, because like you said, in many cases, you'll know your symptoms and your history much more than a doctor who's getting you in and out and says, oh, you have IBS, take a drug. That happened to me. He said, you have IBS, take a drug. I had severe reactions to the drug, and it turned out I didn't have IBS. That was not fun. Well, Kusha, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I'm going to link to, of course, BFR bands, which are a crazy success. I'm going to link to your Amazon page. For everyone listening and watching, where's the best place? People want to find out all things Kusha Karvandi. Where's the number one best one place stop they should go?
Yeah, I'd say the best place, right now, the BFRs are kind of our primary focus. So they can always go to bfrshop.com. That's our main website. They can learn a lot. By subscribing there, they can learn a lot, following our newsletter about, new things that we're releasing, things we're working on, things like that, new books. But they can also always email me directly with questions at Kusha, Kusha, at bfrbands.com. And I'm happy to help answer any questions people had from watching this today as well.
Awesome. Well, Kusha, thanks so much for joining us on the Freedom Club podcast.
Thanks for having me.